Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome back to Elite Dangerous. Today, Frontier discussed some upcoming changes or proposed changes for the engineers that are going to be released in the Q1 update for Beyond. Now these are a continuation of the discussions that Frontier are planning on making for the game for 2018. The previous conversation centered around crime and punishment, most of you will have heard of that by now, and of course there's a feedback forum where that current discussion is still ongoing, and that will be updated with a discussion on the engineers in due course. And in this video I basically just want to summarise some of Frontier's current thoughts on how they want to change and improve the engineers. Now these changes are pretty wide reaching and they will have quite a huge impact upon how the engineers currently function. However, they're not a complete reworking of the engineer system or anything like that. Frontier merely look at this as improving existing content and adapting it to current feedback and thinking from the players. All of these changes can be broken down into a number of categories, so I'll work through them one by one. The first is negative effects and how secondary effects actually impact your roles. So this is when you go to an engineer and do a roll for an upgrade, and you'll get a pretty good roll or you might get a pretty bad roll. But either way, as you're going through, a secondary effect comes up, and these can often give you a very negative impact and totally ruin your roll. Sometimes they can also have a good effect and they ultimately give you what's called a god roll or just perhaps a better roll. Now Frontier are thinking of completely removing the secondary effects. The reason for this is because as it stands right now, they feel that the results are far too random. You never know exactly what you're going to get. Now do keep in mind that this is not for experimental effects, that's something completely different, and I'll discuss that a bit further in. Now what's going to happen is that the baseline upgrades will basically be better than current blueprints, and this will account for the removal of secondary effects. Now on all rolls there still will be potential negative effects, however these will no longer be random, instead they will be fixed. So what will happen is that, for example, you'll know that when you make a particular roll, you will get a 3% penalty to heat. So this system retains the current pros and cons you get for any upgrade, but it removes the random chance element of completely busting your upgrade. And these sort of negative effects will only be applied once per engineering grade. The main drive behind this particular change is that it means that future upgrades will never be worse than your current upgrade. As it applies right now, if you have a great grade 1 upgrade, then poor secondary effects could give you a much worse grade 2 upgrade. And this is something that Frontier really do want to move away from. This of course won't affect the tier or the ranking upgrades. You'll still have to work through rank 1 and achieve a certain threshold to unlock rank 2 and so on up to rank 5. So essentially this will make engineering roles far more predictable and that much more easier to achieve. However, it also means that god rolls and also the very bad rolls will likely be disappearing. The good news is that you'll be able to keep all your existing mods and upgrades. However, you'll not be able to create said modules in the future. Another new change is going to be how pinned blueprints will actually function. They're going to have much more of an impact now. Essentially, what you're about to do is craft any upgrades from anywhere that has an outfitting screen. You won't need to visit an engineer for any blueprint that you actually have pinned. So what this means, for example, is that if you already have the engineer unlocked and you go there and pin a particular blueprint, you'll then be able to head on out to Colonia and craft the upgrade there. Now currently in the game you can only pin one blueprint per engineer, and Frontier's current thinking is that they will retain this particular element, although they say if there's enough demand they may increase it slightly, but they certainly don't want to include the ability to pin all blueprints. Experimental effects are also going to have a pretty massive change. Now this won't affect the experimental effects themselves. These are the things such as regeneration sequence, thermal conduit, thermal shock and so on. These effects will stay the same. What will change is how you can gain them. They're no longer going to be random. And Frontier are also going to remove the favour feature. And essentially what this meant is that you could spend some of your reputation with the engineer to choose a specific experimental effect. So both of those are going, and instead you'll be able to directly purchase experimental effects for a fixed material cost. And these you'll only be able to fit at an engineer base. You won't be able to pin these and purchase these at an outfitting screen, so you will need to go directly to an engineer. Related to these, and in pretty good news, experimental effects are also going to be extended to all other modules. So in effect, no matter the module, Frontier are going to create certain types of experimental effects that will be able to fit onto these. Now do keep in mind, as with all the other discussions about the Beyond series of updates, these are not by any guarantees by any means. They're simply proposals and reflect Frontier's current thinking on the system. So just because Frontier have said this is what they'd like to implement, it doesn't mean it will be implemented. But they will be giving everyone a chance to discuss these proposals on the forums, hopefully from tomorrow, otherwise from Monday, so do keep an eye out for that. One big problem many people have always had with Elite Dangerous and the engineering system, and I've found this particularly problematic, is the storage caps to both materials as well as data storage. Now this is something that Frontier really do want to change, however they don't want to remove caps to data storage or material storage completely, because they feel that basically for gameplay reasons things start falling apart if you have infinite storage. So instead what they want to have is a cap for each individual material, and this will likely be 100 units per item. Now if you're currently over 100 units on any particular material or data element, you won't lose anything. Frontier will let you keep what you have, however you won't be able to collect any more until you're below the new cap. They're also going to introduce an ignore materials feature. So if for example you're out there mining and collecting certain materials and your limpets keep on picking up materials that you don't want and so you eject them, you can set your limpets to no longer collect that certain material. In addition to this, there's going to be some changes made to the interface to make it clearer what materials you already have, as well as their quality level. So essentially it seems what they're saying is that when you target or when you see any material out there in space or on the ground, you'll pretty much instantly be able to see what quality level it is, along with how many units of that said material you already have. Sticking with the subject of materials for the moment, the Beyond Quarter 1 update is also going to introduce a material trader, and these will be available at certain starports, and essentially what will happen is that you'll be able to trade in certain types of materials and receive a desired chosen type of material. There will be diminishing returns for this, so for example you'll hand in 10 of unit X and you'll be able to receive 2 of unit Y. The idea behind this is to make it much more easier for players to find those elusive and sometimes impossible to find materials. So then, that pretty much wraps up where Frontier are with their current thinking on the changes for engineers for the next update to Elite Dangerous. And there may be a few other details yet to be discussed, but in either way you'll be able to see all of this plus anything else, if there is anything else, posted on the feedback forums tomorrow, or maybe Monday. I'll leave a link in the video description below to those forums so you can go on over there and keep an eye on it for yourself. Now all in all, I think these are some pretty positive changes for the engineers. They don't by any means completely change what the engineers are all about or how they work, and I think some people might have been hoping for that. But for me, I do feel that they address the most critical issues with the game, and it would seem that they do go a long way to removing the casino-like effect that the engineers currently do have. Although that said, it does seem that RNG is still going to play a pretty significant part in the whole engineer system, however to a far lesser degree. So then, that pretty much is how things stand right now, and that pretty much brings us to the end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.